Hi, it's the School of Soul here, and I'm Ann Rodelfs.
Deborah Shillette Wilson, Kathy McCommon.
And one thing I want to make clear in our video today is what we've been talking about, the severed soul that Carl Jung described as a persona, the social mask we wear, and then the anima or animus, the anima being the feminine side of males that they separate from, and the animus being the masculine side of females that they separate from. And the third archetype is the shadow, which is our most traumatized self that we totally get rid of, put in the unconscious mind, forget all about. And finally, we have the capital S self, which includes all of these other archetypes. Well, the important thing to know is all these parts are in every one of us unless we do a tremendous amount of work. Now, in our last video, we talked about just some of our experiences that brought these parts of us to light and what we did to integrate them. But in this video, I thought it would be important to discuss the fact that most people don't do this inner work, or they do a little bit. And as a result, they have these severed off soul parts. And what does that look like as we go about our daily lives? Well, they're in every aspect of our society. And if we're stuck in the persona ourselves, we'll tend to see people's personas, the nicest people. But
They mean well.
Yes.
They mean well.
But they have other parts too. For example, the anima and animus, since we've separated off from them, usually early in life, well, they stay stuck at very young stages of soul development. So they behave more like little children. And they come out from time to time and they do to others what was done to them. And there's a shadow that can be very destructive. And the more we integrate our soul parts, the more we can see all that's within every person. But if we're stuck in that persona, the persona is what we see, which is a real handicap.
So I'll give you an example of, this is kind of a continuation from the previous video for me. So we had an amicus lawyer, and the amicus lawyer, for those who don't know, is the child's voice. And the whole purpose of the amicus lawyer is to find out the highest and best solutions for the child in the courtroom. So we had an amicus lawyer that was charming, kind, always wanted what was the highest and the best for the child, was dedicated their life to that, warm, friendly. But as time went on, we began to see a different side. This amicus lawyer never talked to the child, saw the child, had anything to do with the child, I think saw a picture of the child. And so as time went on, we began to realize that there were other factors driving this particular person outside of the best interest of the child. Although the persona that he carried, because he didn't see his shadow part, he carried the persona, oh, this is the child, this is the best for the child. But as we went through, we saw dishonesty, we saw things that we realized that there was much more going on in the shadow part of this man. And even though his persona wanted to help the child and do the best, it ended up that the child was injured and the highest and best good was not served. So looking back, I think, well, if I'd had this training now, would I have been able to have as Anne says, a straighter vision and been able to communicate, perhaps gone around the persona and been able to communicate with another part of him, had more compassion, because anger, you can get angry when you're dealing with personas because they can be so deceptive. So that was my experience that came to mind when Anne asked me, well, at what time in your life can you think of that you dealt with someone with a persona that was truly opposite from what the mask that they wore in public? And that's what came to mind for me.
Well, I wanted to make a comment on what you said, Kathy, about the child being injured, because when we have a wounded child inside and that child is stuck at a young stage of development, he or she will be recreating that trauma by wounding children outside of us. So that happens a lot.
Yeah. Well, that was certainly the case here. And I do think that this particular amicus, I do feel, now that I know what I know, I do feel that he had a lot of woundedness. I can think back on some of his expressions, some of his words, some of his mannerisms, and they were very indicating of childhood trauma and a wounded child.
And that's the evolutionary process. We're out of the denial of the youngest stages of, oh, what a wonderful person, everything's going to be so wonderful, to the jerk, look what he did, he's an idiot.
Yeah.
Which is swinging from one pendulum side to the other to realize he's a wounded soul like all of us, and he needs our help to integrate these lost parts of themselves and return to wholeness.
Well, I saw something similar to that when I was a counselor in a school setting. Of course, one of the things that the kids said to me that at first I thought was just, they were just being nice. was that they said that they told me this, Miss Wilson, you know, you're the first adult that ever listened to me. Yeah. And then another student said something about, you make us whole, you make us united. And it was, you know, it wasn't until later that I realized that they weren't just being nice. But it also saddened me to realize that, you know, and the people that I worked with, they were, you know, they were good people, they were caring people, they wanted to make a difference and in the lives of children. But they were stuck, because when I started working with the children and I found out what was going on in their lives, and realized how traumatized they were, and that their behavior was a reflection of the trauma they had experienced. And because I had specialized in trauma and was trying to educate the people in the schools that I work with, more than one, there were a few people, they would kind of get it on an intellectual level, but I didn't see much into practice, or I guess they were already so stressed out, they just didn't want to take on learning and growing themselves. And so the result of that was that some of the kids I saw were ostracized. Attitudes toward them were very harsh. I mean, I found it very harsh. It's like one young man got kicked out of a class because he didn't have a pencil and a paper. And so he ended up coming down to my office, because I always kept those kinds of things, because this was a very rural, poor community. And there were a lot of kids that they just didn't have, their families didn't have money to buy them, just basic stuff sometimes. So I got him a pencil and a piece of paper. And when I took him back to the classroom, the teacher did not receive us warmly. And he go ahead with a hand and took the kid back into his class. But there was just, it was like he shouldn't be doing, you know, he should just be kicked out of his class because he didn't have a pencil and a piece of paper.
Ouch.
Yeah. And
but again, so often doing to others what has been done to them in one shape or form.
Yeah. And, you know, I guess what I see to me is that when people can embrace the realities of what it is to be a human being and how we've been conditioned in many ways that are not really useful for growth and development, that it's important for us to take that responsibility to grow ourselves beyond our conditioning. And then we would be more open to learning and growing and helping other people, and especially helping kids, because I've spent a lot of my life devoted to working with children of all ages, 2 to 104.
Do you think that the discipline that was put out was overly over disciplined? Why do you think that
Well, see,
happened?
to me, there's a difference between discipline, which is to teach,
Mhm.
and punishment is you piss me off and I'm going to get back at you. That's what
Okay.
I look at it. That's how I look at it.
So why do you think they were taking on such harsh punishment
Well,
methods?
that's what they got.
Oh,
You know, there was a lot in this particular area, spare the rod, spoil the child.
mhm.
You know, so you've got to be harsh and you've got to be severe, and you know, you've got to show them who's boss.
You think that's what they had when they were growing up?
Yeah, I'm sure, and because they grew up in the same area.
Mhm.
You just see how that's in every aspect of our society.
Mhm.
Like people who committed a crime and their punishment is just extreme compared to the crime, or someone that has a particular illness or affliction and the treatment is worse than the original problem.
Sometimes, yeah, I've had that experience.
Because you mentioned not hearing the child. In medicine, my old profession, the voice of the child is so often expressed through our accidents, illnesses,
Mhm.
injuries, and we're not hearing that. We're hearing a problem that needs a solution, and we're just looking at the physical, as we've talked about, and not getting to that deeper soul request for change, that inner child, that young male inside females, or that young female inside males, that is crying out for these symptoms, using the voice of the body to express what has not been heard by these
And
children.
it's not
in
that
real
it
life.
hasn't been said, you know, because, well, it's not just said in words, it's said in behavior.
Mhm.
And for me, I look at behavior as a communication, that something underneath is driving that behavior. And it's just not common knowledge. This body of knowledge is not common knowledge. And so it's not integrated into, it wasn't integrated into the school system. None of the ones that I work with. I mean, maybe it is in other places, but I can just speak of my experience. And it was, you know, it's sad. It was so sad because, you know, people said they really wanted to help, but they really wanted to help to the limit of, I don't want to go there.
Mhm.
Don't, you know, it's not me. If they would just quit doing it, then everything would be okay. It's not about me.
Right. And where are the kids learning to do what they're doing?
Exactly. And so it's just kind of, well, that's how we pass on our intergenerational collective trauma,
Mhm.
because we're not willing to heal, to face the reality of what it is to be a human being and how we've been conditioned in so many ways that we split off from the wholeness of who we are.
So more and more people are recreating their childhood traumas in bigger and bigger and more widespread ways, which is causing the mess we're in right now as a world, in my opinion.
Mine too.
So I just encourage you to look in your lives of where you're just seeing the persona and there's a wounded child, an anima or animus inside that's asking for your attention, or even a really, really angry shadow. And allow yourself to see what these parts of people need.
Got to look behind the persona.
Mhm.
It's there. You can see it if you can just step around and look, because their behavior is going to show it. They can't hide the behavior.
And I would say, you know, we say all these little things about no child left behind and children are our future. Well, that's more than just saying it. We need to put action behind those words if we really want and really have the intention of making a difference in the world.
And that's children living in bodies small and large. All for now from the School of Soul.